and welcome back to JavaScript Playground. In this video, we will talk about selectors and filters in jQuery. Before we get into selectors and filters, let's first understand the basic syntax of jQuery. So as you can see on the screen, this is the syntax to use jQuery. The $sign is used to access jQuery. Selector is used to find HTML elements. And in jQuery, selectors are like CSS selectors. We will talk more about it very soon. The method is used to perform some action on the selected element or elements, because the selector might select one element or multiple. Now coming back, selectors and filters provide a way of finding and extracting information from our web page. Selectors are used to select HTML elements using CSS like selectors. For example, $ and inside the parenthesis P. So this statement will select all the HTML elements with the paragraph tag and will return it as a list of objects. Similarly, $#top_bar. So #top_bar means we are trying to select an HTML element with ID top bar. Similarly, $ and inside the parenthesis header space section. So we are trying to select all the section elements which are inside the header elements. Filters are used to refine the results returned from the selectors. For example, $ and inside the parenthesis P:first. This colon something is a filter, and in this case, it selects the first paragraph returned by the $paragraph selector. The above line of code can also be written like this. So $ parenthesis and the selector, and outside that, you can use this filter functions. So .first. So first is a filter function which does the same thing. It returns the first element selected by a selector. Let's try some examples to understand these better. So in the coming videos, we will be rewriting this web app that we created earlier using JavaScript. So let's check out the code. So this is my index.js file, and we've used a lot of getElementByIds here to select these different elements. So we can replace these document.getElementById using the jQuery selectors. So let's give it a try. So instead of this document.getElementById, we can simply write $. And because this is an ID, so we will have to append this hash in the beginning. Let's save it and check our code. So as you can see, it's not working. So let's check why. Let's inspect. Gives us an error saying list.appendChild is not a function. Earlier when we selected list like this, say document.getElementById, and we did, the name of the ID is to-do list. When we did something like this, we got the list item. But when we do the same thing using jQuery, it gives us this different function. And inside that function, we have our list. So this function, which is returned by jQuery, does not have this appendChild method. So that's why we're getting an error. So instead of appendChild, to add more childs, jQuery has a function called append. So let's use it for now. We will talk more about it later. So append and append. Let's save it. And as you can see, our code is working fine again. So if I inspect this element, it has a class list item. So let's try to select elements with a class. So again, $, and inside $, we can give the class name. So .list-item. So as you can see, it gives me a list of these 200 items. jQuery also allows us to select elements based on attributes. Say for example, this input element, it has this attribute type text. So let's try selecting it. So $, and inside the parenthesis, we can give input. So this returns all the input fields. So in our case, we just have one. So that's why this length of this array is 1. So what we want to do is we want to select input with a certain attribute value. So for that, we add this square brackets, And inside the square bracket, we mention the attribute. So let's say type. So when I hit enter, it returns me all the input elements which have the attribute type. And to get elements with specific type value, we can add equals to and some condition here. Let's say text. When I hit enter, it gives me the same element. Let's quickly try adding one more over here. Let's change the type to say password. Let's save it. Let's try these again. So when I do input, now it gives me two elements. Similarly, when I do input with type attribute, again it gives me two elements. But when I do input with type text, it just gives me one. Alright, so that's how you can select elements using jQuery with certain attributes. Alright, so we can also use some filters on these selected items. So let's say earlier we were selecting all the elements with certain class, which was list item. So it was giving us a list of 200 elements. So let's say we just wanted to select the first one. So colon, first. Now this just returns one element, which is the first one. And as I mentioned earlier, we can also rewrite this like this. So again, we're getting the same list item. So the list element with ID 1, and we have the same element over here as well. Similarly, say we wanted to select the last element. So instead of first, we can write last. And as you can see, it's giving us the list item with ID 200. So the 200 ID element is the last one. So let's check. So now when I hover on this, it highlights the last element. So as you can see, it's selecting the last element. Similarly, say we wanted to select the third element from the top. So for that, we have another filter called EQ. So coming back to the top, so instead of last, it will be EQ, and this accepts a parameter. So we wanted to select the third item, so that means the position will be 2. So as you can see, it's giving us list item with ID 3, and it's highlighting the third one. Alright, so these are some filters that we would be using very often. Now jQuery gives us access to a method called ready. So what it does is, it checks whether the DOM tree is generated or not. Once the HTML elements are mounted in the browser DOM, then we can perform any and all operations on these HTML elements. So let's give it a try. So coming back to this JS file, let's try it on the top. So because we're talking about DOM, so that means we will be working with the document object. So dollar, we can select the document object and dot ready. And this ready, it accepts a callback function, so we can create an anonymous function here. So whenever the document is ready or whenever the DOM tree is generated, let's try printing DOM tree ready. Let's save it. Let's check it out. So as you can see, it's giving this DOM tree ready. All right. So coming back, now what we can do is we can put all our code inside this ready method. Let's save it, and everything still works fine. We're getting a warning that two elements have the same ID because we just copy pasted the elements here. So let's just remove the extra input, and the warning is gone and our web page is working perfectly fine. So what's the benefit of using this ready method? So the biggest benefit is that you get assurance that your HTML elements are rendered in the DOM tree. And second benefit is, now you don't need to put this script tag at the end. You can simply move it in the head. Save it. So as you can see, our web page is working still fine. And that's a wrap for today.